everyone. You're tuning in to Radical Good with your host, Radha Friedman. In this video podcast, we're going to explore the question, what will it take to get more resources into the hands of women and girls, especially women and girls of color, women and girls who are queer, women and girls with disabilities, or all of the above? How can we be more intersectional and inclusive? I've spent 2 decades working on gender equality issues all over the world. And the universal truth that I've seen is that when you invest in women and girls, it creates a ripple effect of benefits that spread through her family, through her community, and ultimately through the world. We'll talk with powerhouse women and some male-bodied allies to hear inspiring stories and learn some practical ways that we can use the resources we have at our disposal to advance progress on equality by spending like it matters, giving like it matters, and investing like it matters, so we can really narrow the gender wealth gap. Hi, everybody. I am very excited to be talking with you today, along with the amazing, if you don't know her, you're about to get to know her. She's amazing for so many reasons. I can't even read the whole bio, or it would literally be the entire podcast episode. But let me just tell you that, like me, Ada has 2 decades of experience working on gender equity issues all over the world. Currently, she's working at Pivotal Ventures, which is the office of Melinda Gates. But prior to that, she was a program officer at the Marguerite Casey Foundation, where she made grants on the western part of our country to promote racial equity. Before that, she was a director at One America, which is an incredible organization started by Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, where she led the Women's Rights Policy Program. Before that, she was a senior advocacy officer at the Women's Refugee Commission. Before that, she worked with Concern Worldwide, Plan International, Save the Children, Refugees International, and the Office of Foreign Disaster Assistance at USAID. I bet you're glad that you're not working there this week. Can you imagine what they must be going through right now? So, okay, that's the highlight reel of Ada's career over the last couple of decades. And I am very fortunate that she has been a partner of mine in more efforts than I can even count. We strategize together, we work on all kinds of issues together, and I'm very excited that you're talking with me today on Radical Good.
Well, I'm honored. Isn't that what you're supposed to say?
That's what you're supposed to say. Thank you for reading the script.
Radha, I'm honored to be here.
So I like to start the conversation just by asking people to share, how did you get here to this podcast interview that we're doing? What did that look like for you? Did you always know that you wanted to do this kind of work? Did you randomly land in it? What did it look like?
Well, first of all, how I got here was from upstairs. I was in this current work from home mode. That is the most direct way I got here. But if I think about here, it's interesting that you say that, because here I don't really think of it as a space or a spot, because I think that we're all just on a journey where we are trying to match our passion with, the good that we put out in the world, and a little bit of world domination thrown in for good measure. And I think that so there's no destination spot. I spent most of my career and most of my life just, trying to work with people who are interested in the same kind of transformation that I am. And that comes in many different forms. So I wouldn't say that how I got here is a route that can be necessarily replicated. It's like it's like there's no roadmap, I should say. And it is like a series of things that happen to you or that you put out in the world. And you're just gathering all of this information and knowledge and people in order to continuously do what you feel is right for the world. And so it's like a ball, right? Like the yarn ball, you're going along collecting pieces of information and people and ideas. And eventually that ball is the massive ball of rubber bands that you find in the middle of Texas if you were on a road trip on Route 66. It's still there, by the way.
I love it. Can you talk a little bit about what it was like for you, because I think about this a lot in the work that I do. Having worked in the nonprofit sector where you're working really directly with communities who are addressing really difficult structural challenges, right? And then suddenly finding yourself on the other table in philanthropy, where instead of asking for the resources, now you're part of the entity that's providing the resources. And the people who are working in philanthropy might not necessarily have been working with nonprofit organizations. They don't necessarily know how they work or what it's like working with those communities. Can you talk a little bit about walking that line and what it's like to go from one side of the table to the other?
You know, I have to say, when you're not on one or the other, the grass seems greener in a lot of ways. So that, you know, after, you know, at least 2 decades of working in nonprofits, my first job in philanthropy was at the Marguerite Casey Foundation, where I was a specific program officer. Previously, I had been part of committees that were grant-making committees that I had done through the Women's Funding Alliance or through Social Venture Partners. All of those were great experiences for understanding grant-making from a community perspective. None of those were the understanding of grant-making from, okay, now you're on the other side. And it's quite a shock for a couple of different reasons. One is you never really stop being that advocate for communities, whether you're in the community or outside of it. You never stop being an advocate for communities. So what I mean by that is, even when you're a grant maker, you still have to make the case for why this grant is important. And you're often in line, you know, there's a queue of other organizations that are also needing funding. There's never enough funding to go around. You're always trying to get more for communities. I'm not sure this is true with every program officer, but for me, it was just like, how do I get more? How do I get more people in the tent? So that part of the job is the same. The part that's a bit of a transition is sometimes I think the thinking, the mentality is different. There's a power dynamic that exists, and it happens the second you get the job. So I still think I'm the same person. So I would go to communities as a program officer, and I would go and meet the people, look at the programs, and I would be like deep in it, deeply engaged in relationship and in communities. But there was one moment where they're like, okay, we're all going to meet together. It was a network of different organizations and that the foundation was funding. And they're like, okay, we're going to meet all together. We have to talk. So could you leave? I was like, excuse me. And they were like, no, you're a funder. We're the organizations and we have to talk. And I was like, no. I'm Ada. So there's a real sense of understanding your own privilege and power within that system. Mm-hmm. And the system places those responsibilities on you, even if you don't want to take them. Mm-hmm. So I had to leave, and given the fact that I have a very severe case of FOMO, it was very difficult. It was also very difficult to have the perception of who I am be changed by my job, right? If you spend most of your identity is based on working with women and girls of color, refugees, immigrants, and then to have them be like, okay, now you got to go, right? Because you consider yourself a part of that community. And what we have to understand when you go to the other side of the table is it's not that you're no longer a part of that community, you're a part of a different community that's working in a different way. So that's a piece of the transition. The other part of the transition is really about the understanding of power and how that gets played out with your colleagues. So a lot of times you end up, saying things like, these are all known now, but back then it was very clear that, the training I was getting at this foundation was, training for all program officers. Things like, if you have a meeting with them and it's over lunch, you pay for it. If they are struggling with anything, you're there for them, and you bend the rules so that they can get what they need. That is not common in philanthropy. I think philanthropy has a certain set of rules. You know, you start with an LOI, you go to a proposal, you do all this reporting. And I think that both places that I work now are trying to kind of remove those dynamics and relax some of those what's commonly held as white dominant culture, patriarchy, in that wanting to know, if you give your cousin $20 and you continuously ask what that person has spent that $20 on, they're going to hate you and they're never going to ask for money again. So I think there's a sense of being able to be in relationship, understanding the power that you have in philanthropy.
I love that you just got into the power dynamics that are inherent there, which is exactly what I was hoping you would talk about, because there's been this burgeoning movement of trust-based philanthropy for several years now, but I feel like it's really slow to catch hold, even though I think people have more than made the case for it. If you're far apart from communities and you're describing them as those people with those problems, but you're not actually experiencing what they are, do you have the right to decide what the solution should be for them rather than being in power with them? And I know that there's some reticence to accept this idea of trust-based philanthropy, that people still want organizations to give them specific, discrete, small projects that can be done, to send reports all of the time, to fill out new applications all of the time. And I don't know that there is really strong communication between the person with the resources and the person who needs the resources, even though they're ultimately trying to reach the same goal, right? Both of those entities are trying to address a problem in society, but those dynamics really get in the way, I think.
And what you're talking about is the system that we're all swimming in. So it is hard to go the opposite way on the escalator, right? But the escalator is taking us all as part of this system to a place. And unless you turn around and walk the other way, we're all going there. You don't have to do anything. You just stand there, right? It's taking you. The times that you turn around and go the other way, that's trust-based philanthropy. That's providing general ops funding. That's multi-year funding. That is requiring annual reporting instead of monthly. That is allowing organizations to decide what their measure of success is and then believe them, right? Not putting extra evaluations on top of that. So, but that is very hard to do. Philanthropy is the last, most conservative part of our system in terms of community organizations and transformation and social impact. And the reason that is because how did they get their money? I mean, if we look back into the history of how, I'm heading towards Decolonizing Wealth, the book by Edgar Villanueva, and it's very true. I mean, we're talking about how people made money. And unless we understand that system still exists and plays out in everyday life, it's really hard to trust, right? It's really hard to engage in trust-based philanthropy because we're so used to connecting power and money. And we're so used to being able to demand, we think that we're doing well. And the best intentions do not stop structural racism and institutional, patriarchy and white supremacy. It just doesn't. I mean, I am, you can marry who you want, right? Whether they're cisgender male, or if they're a woman, or if they're, what doesn't matter, whoever you marry, whatever they hold, they're going to hold that. So it's, you may fall in love with a Republican, but you're not going to change that person overnight. They still hold the same ideals and the socialization that we all do, right? So how do you expect philanthropy to change? It's like you married philanthropy, but he still leaves the cap off the toothpaste. Like there's not much you can do about a system other than continually try to make it better. And the critiques with Anand Giridharadas and Edgar Villanueva and Robert Reich, I mean, there are tons of critiques that are like trying to break down and dismantle these power structures. But that's the first part. I think the second part is really having conversations like this, real conversations that allow philanthropy to kind of take a mirror and look at itself. Mm-hmm. There is a group called the Collective Futures Fund that sprung up of 11 donors who are looking at sexual harassment, but particularly around violence against women, centering women of color and survivors. And the reason I mention that is because one of the things that they're trying to do is sort of walk the talk, right? If you center survivors and women of color, that means they have to be on the committees that are deciding where the money goes. It means that you're holding up a mirror to philanthropy and how they behave. Do they have sexual harassment policies? How are they dealing with violence against women? So it's like the many, many times that philanthropy holds a mirror up to itself. That has to happen continuously. As new people are coming into philanthropy, I just met somebody the other day who, brand new family philanthropy. You would probably guess that it's a white family, who decided, as they should, I want to give all my money away. Well, not all of it because I have a house in Hawaii, but I want to give my money away. And the first thing they do is they say, okay, let me talk to a bunch of people and figure out how to do this. Then they set up the systems. They set up the back office systems. Those back office systems are fiscal sponsors. A lot of times fiscal sponsors are, a board of white men who know how to handle money. So you're basically creating another system in giving your money away. And if you're giving money away, you're giving it away partially making money for another sort of white-headed male board of directors who get the profits off of that, or the investment dividends. So, I think we have to remember like where the money is coming from, how you dismantle those systems, how you reorder those systems in order to actually have a transformation of the space. So it's not just about trust-based philanthropy, that is part of it. It's not just about the critiques of philanthropy. It's also going deeper and deeper into the back end. If you look at every single philanthropy that exists today, you go to their finance departments, you go to their grant management departments. Where is that going, right? Are they all white? Do they all have the same investment people? Are they using the same vehicles for investment? Where is the well, there are a couple of these firms, but they're not as big. Like think about McKinsey and Company, which Anand Giridharadas talks a lot about. And you think about, how many of those, there's one McKinsey and Company. It's got like hundreds of thousands of people working there and partnerships. And it's a very interesting model because it's like the people who work there are also partners of the organization of the company. But when you think about it, where are the female POC-led McKinseys that are as big as that? Where are the female-led bridge spans or Blue Meridians, or all of those systems that are set up to give out large amounts of money only exist to continue the system. If we're not dismantling it, we are actually contributing to it.
I love all of this because if you don't understand and recognize how these systems are structured and how they work, you're not thinking about it in the kinds of solutions that you're trying to build, in the kind of conversations that you're having, right? So taking a look at these systems is so, so, so important as the first step, so that when you enter the conversation, you start it by saying, let's be aware these systems are set up in an inequitable way. So everything that we're about to talk about going forward is going to be about alternate ways that we can do this. How do we break those systems down? How do we change things so that these systems are not as strong and we realize that there are other ways and other futures? So I want to, as we're thinking about all of these barriers for those listening and watching, about how we can effectively move more money to women and girls of color, as well as women and girls with disabilities, women and girls who are LGBTIQ, or all of the above. Because the patriarchy is alive and well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in all of these cases where we see inequalities, what I found in the work that I've done over the last 2 decades, and I don't know if you agree, I find that women and girls are always disproportionately affected by any issue in any group.
Yeah.
They are not represented in the organizations that are making the funding decisions. They're not very well represented in the organizations that have power. So how are you thinking of why it's so important to invest in women and girls of color?
Well, I mean, I think, again, it's sort of historical and based in equality and equity and justice. The fact that women and girls of color are in the situation they're in is based on history. And so I think if we were to upend that thinking, because it's not just thinking, it's a belief, right? And a belief that's been passed down through generations. And I think that our natural inclination is to think that the way the world is right now is the way that it should be. And that's through no fault of our own. It's what we see, it's what we hear, it's the water we swim in. So in order to sort of right size or bring that system in balance, there's a certain amount of dismantling that has to be done, and there's a certain amount of lifting that has to be done. So most of the time we think of women and girls of color from a deficit model, from a deficit basis. We come at this from what they don't have, what they don't see, what they can't do. And if we came at this with the same thinking that we do of a mediocre white man, for example, you would have a different way. So if we just flipped it and thought about the assets, the contribution, and the brilliance of women and girls of color, it would be different. Like, just take any picture that you see today and flip it. There's this beautiful photo of a bunch of, I know you've seen this, Radha, where a bunch of women are at a nail salon, and all of the Asian women who work at the nail salon, which you normally see, right? They just flipped it, are sitting in the chairs, in the pedicure chairs, and all of the white women are doing their pedicures. Mm-hmm. And that image, it takes your brain a second to redo that. Like, well, wait a minute. So that's what I mean. That's what it's going to take. It's not just about that image. It's about the pure belief that we are equal and that we could live in an equitable society, but it's going to take a lot. The other reason I would say is that if you just look at the amount of funding that is given for women and girls, and I feel like you and I say this a lot, and I find it very hard to believe that people don't know this. That again, it's this idea that you flip this image on its head, that there is very little funding. You take any amount of funding, you take a slice of that and you disaggregate it by women and girls, and it is less and less and less. How much money is given to education? Oh, looks like, some odd percentage. And then it's like 0.01 for women and girls. Take any sector and disaggregate it, and you will see the smallest percentages, in some cases negative percentages, of where the money is going and who actually holds that funding, who actually holds that money, who's getting it. And then if you keep going, there is a hierarchy of color as well within communities of color. So it may start at, Asian and not disaggregated Asian women and girls, but you disaggregate that and you find that Hmong women and girls are at the bottom of that ladder, right? You do the same and you get down to color, and darker skinned women and girls are at the bottom of that ladder. So Angela Glover Blackwell talks about this curb cut effect, where if you lift the least of us, that helps everyone. So when a long time ago, when we didn't have the curb that goes down, right? This is like public policy situation where there were disabled folks in wheelchairs who were popping off the curb because there was no ramp down. When they started making the ramp down, for every sidewalk, what they found is the people who had actually helped were mothers with strollers, as well as those in wheelchairs. It also helped blind folks. It also helped those who, little kids who were going across the street. Like, there's so much that one piece of policy does that started out for one most marginalized group of people that ended up helping everyone. So if we think about this from a different way, if we think about helping women and girls of color to the benefit of all women, if we start there, if we were to invest there, you would see a remarkable change and difference in who is running the country, how it's run, the protections that we all have, and who holds power. That ultimately can transform things.
I love this. I love this example so much, because women are more than half the planet. And also, people of color are people of the global majority. So we're talking about most of the world. It's really a very stark reflection of how skewed the resources are. And as you were giving that example, I was thinking, part of the purpose of doing this podcast is to give people not only information about how to kind of think about these issues differently than they might on their own, but also to give them tips and examples. So I'm wondering if you have an example that you're thinking of someone who's doing this right. Like, what's one program or one idea where you think somebody has got this right and more people need to be doing this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think many people have it right. I just think we don't take the time to give them a voice and invest in them. I think there's so much right going on. I think we as funders and philanthropy think we know the answer. And because we're not listening, and by listening, I don't mean just sitting there having somebody talk at you. I mean the active listening that you do when an organization says to you, look, we're struggling with the fact that there is no funding in this area. And we need help. And it doesn't mean giving them money. It means giving them general operating support, multi-year. It means allowing them to decide the reporting structure and the evaluation. It means not just stopping there. It means funding other organizations to work together. It means being in relationship and engagement with organizations and allowing them to set the tone. So a great example is some of the work that Vanessa Daniel does at the Groundswell Fund, where she actually has funds that are directed by activists of color. So the Freedom Fund, the Catalyst Fund, Freedom Fund. She has a reproductive birth justice fund. I mean, just looking at the way that those funds are set up, they're actually being decided by the community itself. Same with Thousand Currents and the work that they do to really the Win Vivere Fund, where the actual community decides on where the money goes. They hold that money and they get to do very non-Western traditional practices to distribute funding. That's the kind of stuff that we need. We need transformational ideas. Another one is this idea of participatory grant making. There is so many different ways to do it. But one thing that I really like and something that I'm working on is actually allowing women and girls to design and dream. Just recently, I was at the Grantmakers for Girls of Color back when we could leave the house in February. for their annual gathering and convening. And there were a number of girls, activists, who were on stage talking about, these were 16, 15-year-old girls, talking about, the type of activism they are doing. One of them is Takota Iron Eyes, who is, her parents are activists. She was a part of the pipeline work and lived on the reservation, and so did her parents. And she talks about how she doesn't know what it's like to be a kid. She's 16 years old and she doesn't know what it's like to dream for the future. And I think it was that moment and another few moments of that conference. And every year that conference does something, just kind of breaks something inside of me every time. The idea that you can invest in an idea that a 20-year-old white guy coming out of Harvard with a hoodie on, you can invest in that guy's idea in a basement. But we don't invest in allowing women and girls, particularly women and girls of color, to sit down, give them the funding, and design their own futures. We always have to be a part of it. We always want to be up in the mix. We always want to be able to tell them, yeah, okay, that doesn't fit into my strategy, right? And the truth is, what your strategy should be about transformation. And what's more transformational than allowing women and girls to design their future? If you want to help, if you want to do something, organize a way to get money to a bunch of women and girls who design their future, who decide what it looks like, what it feels like, who decide for themselves. Because not only are you giving them an opportunity that you haven't given to anybody that you don't give to anybody who looks like them, but you're also creating a space that is not given. A great example is Sarita Gupta and Ai-jen Poo, who developed Caring Across Generations. The way that they developed it is they both, as leaders of EDs of their own organizations, they both went on a walk at a conference on the beach and came up with it. But and I've asked them this before, I was like, how did that happen? How did it happen that you guys were able to get together? And they were like, well, it just so happened that we were at the same conference and we took a walk on the beach and this is what happened. And I said, do you not have time to do? No, we don't have time to do that. We don't have funding to take the space for ourselves to dream and design. Gloria Steinem says that dreaming is a sort of planning, right? So if you don't give anybody the opportunity to do that, we're doing the same ideas, the same stuff over and over again, and we're not making headway. Do you know why? Because we're not allowing people to dream and then funding those ideas in the same way we are in Silicon Valley.
In the experimental pilot program funding that I was doing in my last organization, that people were coming up with these really unusual ideas and very unusual partnerships too, like very
right.
strict bedfellows. Nobody would fund those ideas. And what I loved about the work that we were able to do was to be that first funder, to say to them, I believe in you and your idea. And once they got that initial grant, then other funders were willing to get on board and help them sustain it, replicate it, sometimes scale it, depending on what the idea was. But you needed that first stamp of approval from that first funder. And so many funders are risk averse. They don't want to take that first risk.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And then that just perpetuates this model where the power is all held in one place. So I wonder if, especially in these coronavirus times that we're living in, there is someone, I mean, you've listed so many incredible names just now, and I know that you've worked with all of these people too, like Ai-jen Poo, Alicia Garza, I mean, there's so many of them, but is there somebody that you really think of that inspires you, especially when you're kind of in difficult times, or maybe you have like a Rolodex of people who inspire you?
Well, you are one of those people.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of people that that are out there, but I think one person that I really admire is a woman named Dr. Alfie Breland Noble, who was an academic for 20 years and then decided to start her own work and really branch out to talk about young people of color and mental health, and particularly Black young people and mental health, which is not something that is talked about, but she is out there doing it, and I admire her. But there's so many people I admire. I mean, really, Radha, you're one of the people who, if we talk about transformation, if we talk about how we want to have an impact on the world, I think you are one of the best examples of that, because your life has been about that, and you're always searching and looking for a way to enact that in reality, while being reflective and understanding your own space and privilege in the world. So it's you. It's all you.
So amazing. Okay, for everybody who's listening to this, I did not pay her to say that. She just did it of her own volition. It's going to sound very suspicious. People are going to be like, what kind of podcast is this after all? Okay, so my final question for you is, can you think of another amazing badass woman that I should interview on this podcast?
Ooh, so we're talking about transformation. We're talking about world domination by women and girls, particularly women and girls of color around the world. So I think you should interview Issa Ellis.
Oh, great idea. At the Gates Foundation.
Yes. And she will give me a side eye on this, but I think you should interview Issa Ellis. And the other person is Melanie R. Brown, who also is based in DC, and she also works for a different part of the Gates Foundation. But I think it would be interesting to get both their perspectives. You could even do them together. Be like a little panel.
Those are great suggestions. I love it. Thank you so much.
Wait, I got one more.
Okay.
I think you should also interview yourself. So I think you should have somebody on who then interviews you. Okay,
I like this. I mean, you spent this whole interview talking about flipping things on their head, and look, you just did it right now.
Oh,
flip it around.
Stephen Robinson, you'll have to do him too.
Yes, male-bodied allies are also welcome on this podcast, and he's on my list already, so we're thinking the same thing. We're in the same line once again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hi, everyone. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If today's conversation piqued your curiosity, please comment below, review, and share it with your friends and colleagues. And let me know your suggestions for future guests you'd like to hear from. Also, follow me on social media. The links will be in the show notes. And be sure to sign up for my newsletter on my website at www.radhafriedman.org. If you want to be inspired, think big, and take action to advance gender equality, then subscribe to this podcast to hear more inspiring stories and tips on how we can close the gender wealth gap. Thanks for listening.